everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson. I'll be your host once again. And as always, I'm joined by Scott. Scott, how are you doing this week?
Hi Ben, hope you're well. Hello everybody. It feels like it's been a rather big week, both for some club sides, but also for the national team as we kind of embark on a new era. But we'll get to Devil Time later, I'm sure.
Yeah, 100%. We have to talk about the new man in charge of the Red Devils, Domenico Tedesco. And we'll give you our opinions on that as well. And like you said, Scott, top and bottom of the league, there was a lot of good fixtures. And you just feel like the league clearly didn't know when they put these fixtures in that this is how the league was going to pan out. But they somehow engineered it that we had top and bottom clashes throughout this weekend. Obviously, still no Joris, and probably for the best this weekend because he was one of the most frustrated men probably in Georgia after the result his side got and the manner in which that result happened. And then he couldn't find a stream for the youth team as well. So it wasn't the best of footballing weekends for our Joris, but hopefully...
They won as well. They won. Young won, the senior side lost. So, swings and roundabouts.
Swings and roundabouts, indeed. And yeah, we will definitely get to the Challenger Pro League because there was a lot of drama on the final day of the regular season there. But firstly, let's quickly go through the results from the Pro League. Leuven and Cercle Bruges drew 0-0 on Friday night. Eupen left it late to beat Mechelen 2-1. Club Brugge and Union played out a 1-1 draw. Really exciting game that. But then Westerlo and Ghent went one more. They drew 3-3 on Saturday. Charleroi pummeled Solang. They won that one 3-0. Genk, as we just mentioned, they lost 1-0 to Antwerp in the top of the table clash. Anderlecht, they scored 3 goals. Who would believe it? They beat St. Truden 3-1. Standard dropped an egg at home. They lost 2-0 to Kortrijk. And then Zulte Waregem drew 1-1 with Oostend in a result that literally neither team was going to benefit from. But let's start then with one of those games that you can kind of relate to that analogy of if a tree falls in the forest and doesn't make a sound, like what did anything actually happen? Leuven and Cercle Bruges play a game on a Friday night that ends 0-0. Did anything actually happen? And that's literally it. Nothing really happened in this one. I started watching this game before switching over to some of the other ones, but Cercle I thought started the better team. There was just a lot of lumping the ball forward from both sides, and strange from Leuven because I've always thought with Mark Beers, he's always spoken a little bit about playing out from the back and stuff like that, and they just didn't really do that. They just were lumping it straight down kind of Marcelan, Popovic and Ravic's throats, which, I don't know, I felt like without Jesper Dahlund, you'd probably want to kind of exploit the Cercle Bruges defence a little bit, but without him, they kept a clean sheet, which is great for them. Mechi continues to be one of the actual top performing goalkeepers in the league. So it's good from them. I thought Cercle were the better team in the first half. I felt like they just wanted the ball a little bit more, especially Abu Francis in midfield. I'm very much enjoying watching Abu Francis in that kind of central area. I think he's a really, really good player. Second half, again, just not really much happening. I think Leuven didn't get a shot in until the kind of end of the first half because their XG was 0 for the first half for the most of the time I was watching it. They only managed 1 shot on target, whereas Cercle had 5 on target and 12 shots overall. So they probably would have felt like they should have won that game. But Scott, I guess it's really hard to talk about this one because literally nothing did happen. It was a really drab result, which is... We don't really expect that when we look at a Cercle Bruges side that are quite an exciting, entertaining team to watch. And even though Leuven are on a bad run of form, they usually, like, their games are interesting and exciting. So it was a weird one that these two teams played out such a kind of drab 0-0.
Yeah, your tree analogy's rather good, Ben. I like that. Yeah, not a lot you can really say about this game, and not just because it finished 0-0. A couple of performances to highlight, one of which you touched on. Abu Francis, I thought, had a good game. CK had a good game again. He's obviously kind of building up his fitness, and you can see him improving week on week now. I think Rika having a good game for Leuven. In fact, I thought the Leuven back line, Pletings and Wedra Ogo had a decent game as well. But other than that, nothing really at all to report here, I don't think.
No, that's probably going to be the shortest match review we've ever done of any matches because
they do happen. So. It does happen.
Yeah. And we usually are quite lucky in the sense that we don't normally have to skip through games that are really dull. But let's move on because, we could just sit here and talk about nothing. And that's basically the same thing as what happened in that one. Let's go to East Belgium then, to the Kerweg Stadion, and Eupen against Mechelen. Huge game for both sides. Eupen obviously on a really bad run of form. Mechelen as well, having not won in the last two, looking to really push themselves above that drop zone. And I mean, if they had won, they could be outside chances of playoff two, because they would have caught up there. And it did get off to a pretty good start, actually, for them. Big of a starter. Really nice finish from the edge of the box from him to give them a 1-0 head start in the 10th minute. 14 shots overall for Mechelen, but just 4 on target. And if that doesn't sum up their woes in terms of a striker, I don't know what does. They started with Alessio de Cruz as the striker. I just do not see him as a striker. I see him much more as kind of a off the striker sort of player. Julian Ngoy, I think, he wasn't even on. Oh, he was on the bench, but yeah, they weren't even kind of prepared to play him, which I thought would have been a good idea against his former club, potentially. They also had Enoch Aguier, the man that joined Burnley from Anderlecht and then came straight back to Belgium. I wonder if he even got on a flight. I presume he probably just got on the train from Brussels straight to Mechelen. Do you know what I mean? Pretty pointless going all the way over to Burnley just to turn around and come back. But yeah, stayed 1-0 for a very long time. It looked like Mechelen were going to get away with their win, despite not putting their chances away. For Eupen, this would have been a disastrous result in many senses, because against a team so close to them, and it was just not going well. But then my favourite player, Conan Ndri, steps up in the 86th minute to make it 1-1. At that point, you're thinking, right, they've rescued a point, that's great. But then 5 minutes later, Brandon Bai gets his first goal for the side. Lovely finish from the edge of the box. I think it was our man Davo who got the assist. David Alvarez with the assist. Good old Davo making his mark early on. 2-1 to Eupen. Absolute scenes at the end of the game, just players everywhere in terms of the bench was up from Eupen, which is a really good sign. If you're reading kind of into body language and stuff like that, seeing the players really celebrate that victory shows that they do care about the club and they are caring about keeping them up, because I've always felt with Eupen you could sometimes potentially attract players that just wouldn't really care about a random club in the east of Belgium. It's quite out of the way. But Ed still gets a win that he desperately needs. He can now go back to the family WhatsApp and actually give some good news while his brother's hoarding all the kind of family praise. But for Mechelen, Scott, in the grand scheme of things, results didn't mean it was that bad a result. But like against Eupen, a side that are struggling, that's a result they really should have held on to, and they probably should have scored more goals to make it more comfortable and not really let the Pandas back into it.
Yeah, I think on the whole, Mechelen were actually the better side and should have won this. I mean, talk about throwing the game away. Stephen Defoe will be really annoyed with that, I think. And that's a huge result for Eupen. You know, you were talking about what that might mean to them, but when you think about Kortrijk winning this weekend as well, that's a massive 3 points for Eupen, I think. I mean, a point wouldn't have been the end of the world in the scheme of things, but, you know, that just kind of keeps their heads above water along with Kortrijk, rather than being, you know, kind of right in the mire. And psychologically, I think that could be really big for them. And the gap between Kortrijk and Eupen and Mechelen now in 13th isn't too great. It's only 4 points, so the two of them winning, you know, have concertinaed things kind of even more down there, and made it even more interesting for us than it already was. But I mean, to throw the game away like that, you know, in the last 5 minutes is just the sorts of things that, you know, drive coaches absolutely mental, especially when you don't need to. You're right, the winning goal was actually very good. You know, you can't look at it and go, well, it was preventable. It's actually just a good winning goal. But equally, you know, if Mechelen had managed to hold out, they psychologically would have felt very differently going into the next 2 or 3 weeks as well, and would have leapfrogged Charleroi above them if they'd managed to hold on to the points as well. So it's just a case of their inconsistency rearing its head again, which has kind of plagued them all season for various reasons. And you're right about Cruz. I mean, I don't feel he's a natural striker. And as we were saying a couple of weeks ago, Mechelen have been, you know, doing, you know, there's been quite a lot of rotation going on this season, some of it enforced because of injuries, which they've had a terrible season with injuries, actually, little niggly ones and longer ones, some of which are to key players as well, some of the real quality in the squad, which obviously doesn't help. But it's just one of those performances that we've seen from them this season where, you know, they probably should have got more, but because things haven't been going away for most of the season, they don't in this game either. Really frustrating for them. And yeah, Ed exactly, you know, the body language you're saying people are into body language. Regular listeners will know that I definitely am. I'm always on the watch for that on the bench and on the pitch. And this means a lot to them because we spoke recently about Eupen really needing to pick up some points over the next month anyway, if they were going to kind of build up any kind of momentum, especially with Zulte Waregem being the one side down at the bottom who seemed to be starting to show signs of picking up some points that were bringing them back into contention again. So some huge wins for some sides down at the bottom there to make it, as I was saying, even more interesting than it was this time last week.
Absolutely, and that's back-to-back throwing away of winning positions by Mechelen. Obviously, the 2-2 draw with Charleroi. And then just looking ahead, the only side they play that's beneath them in the rest of the season is Salang. Every other team they play is above them, apart from obviously Zulte Waregem in the Cup semi-final. So if you're talking league doesn't lie and table doesn't lie, like they are, then you'd expect them. Obviously, I feel that this isn't going to happen, but to only pick up 3 points out of their next 9 matches, which it may be enough. Just because some other teams might just completely capitulate and not get any more points, but it's worrying signs. And I don't know if it gets down to it, the club, would they just be like, right, we cannot risk this. We're getting someone in to keep us up other than Stephen Defoe. Like, could you envision a situation where they say, enough is enough, we can't continue with this. The only change we can make is the managerial one because we can't bring in players to replace them.
It's really interesting because I think it was a couple of weeks ago we talked about there being a real danger of them getting sucked right in, because it has happened to them before in the past where they looked to have enough and be clear, and actually as it got closer to the end of the season, that's exactly what happened. And the last week of the season comes, it goes against them, and they have gone down before. So it's happened to them before. I mean, looking at it now, they're sort of 8 points clear of the drop zone with 9 games to go, and that's not enough to feel comfortable, I don't think. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do, because results since we had that conversation, as you were saying, they've dropped more points than picked up in that time. So it's heading in the direction that we kind of flirted with, which is kind of quite concerning for them. I'll be going to see them in about a month or so, in a little bit over a month. I'll be going to one of their home games. So it'll be very interesting to see where they are at that point in time, to watch them up close to see if things have changed much since then. So now they know that I'm coming to visit, they can put on a show for us, can't they?
Yeah, is hoping. And I think it was Belgian football stats on Twitter put up a table basically like since the World Cup break, like teams form and stuff. Mechelen would be just 1 point below where they are now. That kind of shows how like it's not that they were in a bad run, they just had a pretty horrendous season overall, and they kind of just would be in the same spot they would be in now. Interesting, we spoke last week obviously about Leuven. They'd be third bottom if you took the table just from after the World Cup, which kind of again re-emphasises the point. The only 2 teams that are in the same position are Salang and Ostend as the bottom 2, which is very surprising. But let's move away from the basement of Belgian football, the Belgian Pro League. Let's go to the top. Let's go to the Jan Breidel for Club Brugge against Union Saint-Gilloise. I think I made a prediction last week that I expected to see a really, really good performance from Club Brugge, and I think I was pretty wrong on that one. I'm happy to be disagreed with by Club Brugge fans and stuff like that, but I just felt like if anything was going to come for them from this game, it was going to be from Mr. Noah Lang. I thought he was by far and away their most dangerous player. I think Buchanan had an all right game, but Lang was certainly the one. And I thought Bjorn Meyer and Lang, that they're starting to get like some good work going down on that left-hand side. So that's kind of, Scotty Parker just needs to just give the ball to Noah. Like that should be a tactic from now on. He hit the post early on, actually. It was actually a really good save from Anthony Morris, kind of tipping it onto the post, and no one was there to put the rebound away. But after that midfield 3 of Ritz, Onyedika and Van Aken was just dominated for the first half. Like Lazar Armani was just all over this game. His fingerprints absolutely everywhere, running the show, just his energy, his ability on the ball. Like FootMob gave him a rating of 6.1, which I think is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. He was way better than that. Way, way better than that. They gave Yaremchuk a 7, and I think I gave him a 4. So we clearly weren't watching the same game. And that shows if you just go off stats and not looking at the game. But yeah, Armani was great. He was instrumental, I guess, in the goal that gave Union the lead, keeping the ball in just. I couldn't really tell with the stream I was watching whether it was in or not. So I don't want to say for definite whether it was or not, but they looked at replays and they decided it was. I think it's Newcoop that sends in the cross, and like Lapoussin is there at the back post. Just I don't think Mignolet's going to save that. Not great defending from Hendry or Mata. Just not picking up Lapoussin. He's not really that much of an aerial threat, to be honest, usually, but it was a really nice header from him into the far corner. And yeah, Union really should have scored more than they did. They had 19 shots, but just 2 on target. Vertessen was very quiet. He was not as good as he was last week. Boniface, I thought, was pretty decent. He was, just running at Hendry and Mekler the whole time. Hendry, I think, started a bit shaky, but as the game got on, he got a lot better and a lot more confident. Same with Onyedika in the midfield. Like Amani was running rings around him in the first half, but by the second half, he was a lot better. He was making some good tackles, breaking up the play. Somehow didn't get booked, which I think is a skill in itself because he just did a lot of take fouls. But of course, it was after I messaged on our chat and said, "Is Hans van Aken even playing? He's done absolutely nothing. All he was doing was losing the ball. He looked so slow." He then obviously gets the equaliser, a great header from him. I still don't think he did anything really else in this game. Again, feel free to disagree with me if you think he did, but all I can remember is him getting the ball with his back to goal, Senelin and sprinting like 20 yards every time and just clattering him. Usually cleanly, actually, to win the ball. But yeah, 1-1 at half time. I felt Scott Parker he had to make changes because the midfield was awful for Club Brugge in this game. He didn't actually make any changes at half time. He did bring off Yaremchuk, who was very quiet again. Also comes Kamal Soa. Nielsen came in for Mats Ritz. Gustav Nielsen came on for Union as well for Job Vertessen. But yeah, that's basically how it finished at 1-1. Club could have nicked it at the end. They had a really good chance. Lang also had a really good chance that he should have finished, but just completely missed it. And I was certain he was going to score that one late in the second half. I think Hendry had a header at the death that went over the bar. So Club will probably look at this game and think that we had our chances and we could have won it. But I think in the overall grand scheme of things, Union really should have won this one.
Yeah, I think a draw was probably a fair result when you look back at the game. Union perhaps marginally the better side, offensively, but I think Club probably had the better of the chances, as you were kind of describing there, Ben, just couldn't take some of them. It's really interesting to hear Scotty Parker now having kind of come out and basically said that he wants Noah Lang to be his main man, his main striker, and that's quite a big call so early on for a number of reasons. You can kind of see why, but I can also see how that could potentially create a little bit of tension in that camp. I don't think that's something Ferran Jutgla is going to particularly like, and Roman Yaremchuk obviously won't like that because that means he's slipping even further down the pecking order. And I said last week that I felt that he would definitely want to go out on loan in the summer, and I think the chances of that happening have almost certainly increased with Scotty Parker saying that he wants Noah Lang to be his main man now. He's the sort of player that Scott Parker likes, I think. He's obviously excited by offensively what he can bring to the side. Although I did notice them having a conversation on the touchline at one point, and Scotty Parker looked quite concerned with Noah Lang's frustration, and I think what he was trying to say to him was, look, just calm down and focus on the game. So we did see an early indication of how his frustration can and does get the better of him sometimes. But if he can focus on his football and Scotty Parker can keep his mind on that, then there's an opportunity for him to flourish. Because I think the interesting thing about Lang is he showed signs this season of the flashes of brilliance that we saw a while ago that we haven't seen for kind of quite some time. So from that point of view, Club will be very encouraged by that. But, I mean, that's 1 win in 7 now under Scotty Parker, which obviously isn't great. They've conceded 9 and only scored 8 in the time he's come in as well. So from an offensive point of view, although they're looking better in spells, I thought the opening 20 minutes of this game, I thought they were the better side. And then things kind of settled down, as they often do in games. But it feels a bit floaty and topsy-turvy at the moment from Club, and he's still getting the feel for his squad, and they're not entirely convincing over the course of sort of 90 minutes yet. But this game is a really good feisty encounter between the two, as they have been for a while, because obviously they've been title challengers. We were at the reverse fixture back in October, and that was every bit as exciting as this one, just in a different way. So this particular fixture is is starting to become quite spicy on the Belgian football calendar, and it's one to watch out for whenever it comes up. But yeah, my feeling is a draw was ultimately probably the right result over the piece, and I think the big winners, obviously from a playoff one perspective this weekend, are the Great Old, of course, and we'll get to them in due course with all of the other sides round about them dropping points, and they were the ones who took real advantage of all of the results this weekend, I think.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And if I'm honest, I'm pretty anxious about, well, not anxious, I suppose probably quite a strong word, concerned about what sort of performance they're going to give against Benfica. Because Hufkins had clearly worked out the Champions League. Like, I don't think he'd ever really worked out the Pro League. He struggled in that. But Champions League, they knew what they had to do. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Without Scott Olsen, without Eucla, like, is Scott Parker going to be able to do anything against a Benfica side that I think Will was saying on commentary are just absolutely flying?
Yeah, they're in very, very good form, and even when they're not, the offensive talent that side has is enough to frighten anybody, regardless of the form that they're in. The other way of looking at that big tie coming up, of course, is that it is a free hit, of course, so they can go out and express themselves and just see what happens. But there's certainly been nothing to suggest in club's recent form that they go into that game with a huge amount of optimism, I suppose. But they've bucked a trend in Europe so far, so we just need to see how it goes. But it'll be an interesting one, both as a test of, I suppose, Scotty Parker tactically, because playing European football at that level is new for him as a coach, and a test of where club are kind of overall, because I kind of feel like even since the managerial change, there's been no discernible improvement really in any sense yet since Hufkins kind of left the club, and that's not a reflection on Scotty Parker, obviously. But as you were saying last week, I think 7 games in now, I think that's enough time to be able to have a look at the tweaks he's made and the things that are starting to become uniquely his, and starting to make some calls on some things, and he's making it difficult to be too optimistic about them at the moment. But I'll keep my fingers crossed that we can get a positive result there for the larger coefficient as well, of course.
Yeah, 100%. I just don't want to see that really good group stage run that they went on just kind of come to a pretty disappointing end in the knockouts. Like, in a sense that as long as they're competitive, that's all we can really ask for. But the way they were playing in those group stages, it'd be such a shame if they're not able to replicate those performances over 2 legs against Benfica, because then we'll always be saying, but what if they've been able to carry that through? But it's like he's got his defensive partnership sorted. Mainly, like, it's going to be Meyer. It looks like Hendry and Meckel is sorted. It looks like he prefers Ritz over Nielsen. And obviously, yeah, Lang. He said he wants to play Lang as a central striker, then start Jaremchuk. So, who knows, maybe Jaremchuk against his former side, there's going to be something in that. But yeah, they're just, like you said, I'm not going into watching this game full of confidence for them. But obviously, fingers crossed, we'll be cheering them on, and hopefully they can do the business as well as the other teams that were involved. One of those teams will be Ghent. They kicked off the Saturday game against Westerlo, and it started pretty openly, I guess we could say. A couple of chances for either side. Good save from Sinan Bolla actually to deny Alessio Castro Montes. Looked like his shot was destined for the top bins, but yeah, Bolla stuck out a big hand to tip it over the bar. However, then there was a penalty given for Ghent. Handball in the area. It was pretty obvious. To be fair to the referee, I don't think he could see it, but after VAR intervened, it was always going to be a pen. Up step Hugo Kuipers. He scored again. Top scoring Belgian in the Belgian Pro League, having a great season. He's now equalled, or he's one better than his tally last season for Mechelen, so that's always a good sign. However, literally 3 minutes later, Maxime de Kuipers scores for Westerlo. Lovely cross to the back post from Fixels. Reynolds knocks it back across. Nardi gets a hand to it, but de Kuipers there to almost miss, to be fair to him, almost puts it wide, but he grabs a goal to make it 1-1, and then on his debut, Gift Orban, flippin' heck. We got to talk about these goals. The first one was Hong-esque, I guess we could say now. Like, Hong did exactly the same thing on his debut. Acrobatic volley, Bolat no chance. That was number 1 for Gift. Nasser Chadli, literally 5 minutes later, Ghent just could not hold the lead. He gets very fortunate, I guess we could say, as the ball kind of ricochets off of the post and just basically hits him and goes in. All 3 of the goals for Westerlo in this game were avoidable from a Ghent perspective, in my opinion. Just was not great defending or reactions to bubbles and stuff, and none could be more like apt than the 47th minute third goal for Westerlo from Lucas Van Eno. Just horrendous defending, awful defending. Like, I think all three of the centre backs were involved in messing this one up. The first one's Akumi's like, he's trying some sort of like skill deep in his own half, dribbling the ball out, and it just goes horrendously wrong, and he loses it. The ball comes in, and Ngaju and Turin Liga just do not deal with it. They just like kick it against each other. Eventually, it just comes to Eno, and he puts it home. But then we get goal of the game, goal of the weekend, maybe even goal of the season. I think it's Hong with the pass, inch per pass over the top, and it just sits up on the edge of the box for Gift Orban to leather it past Sinan Bola. And what the way I described it does not do this goal justice. Like, you need to go and find it either on our Twitter account, the Get Belgian Football Twitter account, look on Eleven's Twitter account. Like, just go and find this goal because it is so good. The connection Gift makes with it is just incredible. Oh, what a debut from him. What a finish that was. The former Stabæk man only moved to Europe last season, I think, from Bison FC in Nigeria, joined Stabæk, scored like 14 or 16 goals for them in their promotion from the Norwegian second tier, then comes straight to Belgian football and starts off like that. I mean, we've seen some good debuts, Scott, in the Belgian league, but that, in terms of like the 2 goals that he scored, I don't think there have been many better.
Yeah, that second goal in particular is just wonderful. I mean, the through ball, the assist is every bit as good as the finish. Actually, it's just fantastic stuff. And you can't ask for better than that. When you've gone to a new club, really, I mean, really hitting the ground running, literally like that, with a couple of cracking finishes. Certainly set the bar high, Orban. Now, we know what you can do. So so one way of looking at it is that it's all downhill from here, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, fantastic goals. Ghent should have won this, really. I think Big Hein will be well annoyed, particularly with his defenders, as you were kind of describing earlier, because some of the defending was just frightening. Actually, the stuff of nightmares. If it had been a little bit better, I think Ghent would have left Westerlo with the points in the end. But defensively, it was just a bit of a horror show from them, and they've had defensive issues for a while now. Big Hein's been actually lamenting that in some of his press conferences recently about how thin in the ground they are there, and how that's somewhere that they need to improve. Both on and off the park. But a wildly entertaining game, particularly from a neutral's perspective. I would imagine it wouldn't have been much fun to watch from a Westerlo or a Ghent fans' perspective, all in the same week that we learnt, of course, the big news as far as the Buffaloes are concerned is the confirmation that the club are now officially up for sale, and they've enlisted the help of a British sports investment company to try and assist them to find the right buyers. Club has been unofficially up for sale for a while, but now it's public knowledge that they are looking and seem to be looking further afield, because there has been some interest, but from what I can gather, it's just not been the right potential buyers. So that's kind of quite big news, because Ghent are actually kind of quite an attractive club to acquire if you think about it. There's lots of positive reasons why a footballing investor would want to add Ghent either to their portfolio or as their first club. It would be an attractive purchase, definitely. So a lot going on with the Buffaloes this week.
Yeah, and they also found out Kamil Piatkowski is going to be out for a while as well, just to kind of rub salt in the wound of their ridiculous injury problems they have at the moment. It's just, not looking good as they have to go to Karabag midweek, which I'm sure Hein's going to really enjoy the little trip over to Azerbaijan. But he thinks they'll get Nurlio back potentially, and maybe Hulsager, which will at least make some difference to the side that he can put up, because it is very much bare bones at the moment, unfortunately. Let's go to Wallonia. Let's go to Charleroi, the most beautiful part of the world. They hosted Selang. Selang obviously coming off that huge home win. Could they put back-to-back performances together, or were they just going to return to their kind of poor form that they'd shown? Obviously, it's the latter. Vacuum Bio ran basically the length of the pitch in the 18th minute. Really, unselfishly plays it to Hossein Zadeh, who has every right in the world to shoot, but makes such a good decision. It's just one of those things, you watch it, and I think when you actually break it down, the ability he shows there to be he could have shot. He has every right to shoot. He's got a great angle, but Bio was the better play there. he just cuts back in and plays it across by, strikes it home. Really nice play from Hossein Zadeh, actually. He was kind of all over this game. I think he had a really good shot as well in the end of the first half that Deitch saved. It was basically all Charleroi. They got their second, though, in the second half. Of all the two players to link up, it was Damien Mark and Jonas Bayer. Obviously comes from a set piece, drops to Mark. Mark flicks it to the back post. Bayer's there to just knock it in quite straightforwardly. They then get a penalty. New man Nikola Stulic is taken out. Well, he's tackled in the box. It looked quite soft, I'm not going to lie, but when you watch the replay, I guess it's one of those ones that once it's gone to VAR, it was always going to be given as a foul. And then up stepped Marco Ilamaricha. He converts a penalty. Quite a strange decision for the penalty taker, I thought. Of all players, don't get me wrong, massive fan of Marco Ilamaricha, one of my favourite players, but didn't see him as a penalty taker, but he proved everyone wrong, slotting it home. Finished 3-0. Solang, pretty awful, to be honest, just 2 shots, one of those was on target. Lapointe, the hero from last week, came out and said their performance was disgraceful and the fans deserved so much better. It just kind of felt like I thought I had this kind of inkling that, right, are they going to now, like, even if they didn't lose this game, just pick up another point, start to slowly pick up points. But I feel like this result just kind of like just sets everything back again. It's like, yeah, they're going down. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, yeah, that was just a blip. The win was just something that was going to happen against a poor Leuven side. They've come up against the Charleroi side. Bayo's back. They just steamrolled them. This curtains again, potentially. They'll win next week now. We've said that. But they're not. Their lack of consistency was always going to be their problem, and it just showed in this game, didn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's been the story, the Serang story for a while now, not being able to get back-to-back wins, never mind being able to win at home. It might be the case that they've been partying all week after that, because that was so momentous was that statistically and psychologically for them that perhaps they had the whole week off, and that's why things went pear-shaped so badly for them this week. Yeah, I mean, not a lot to say from a Serang perspective, just really, really poor. Charleroi, on the other hand, are one of the sides at the moment who, over the last few weeks, we've seen a real upturn in form from. Starting to pick up points, things starting to kind of settle. Felix Mazu is now kind of starting to stamp his authority in that side, reshaping the starting lineup a little bit over the last few weeks. Really interesting midfield in this game, Hossein Zadeh, Ella Mahitra and Adam Zorgan, which is a strong midfield actually. And, I think they're starting to kind of look quite decent. They're starting to respond to his ideas tactically as well. The classic Mazu 3-5-2. Bayo's got a goal and an assist in his first couple of games since he came back, so he's just slipped back into that old pair of gloves that he had, like he'd never been away, and could, by the looks of it, form a reasonably effective partnership with Nikola Stulic, I think. It's obviously very early days, but I think there's a lot of positive stuff for Felix Mazu to take out of that partnership. Obviously, they've got another striker lined up for the summer who'll be joining them in the summer when Bayo almost certainly goes back to sit on the bench at Watford, which would be a great shame, which is probably what's going to happen. But Charleroi have been very proactive in identifying a striker that will be joining them in the summer when that switch happens. But yeah, I mean, steamrolled is a great word to describe what actually happened here, because there was only really one side that were going to win this, I think.
Yeah, pretty uneven contest, which is a shame because Serang have actually been more competitive than we expected, but they weren't really in this one at all. Let's go to the big one on Sunday, which was Genk against Antwerp. Great atmosphere, tackles flying in. Enjoyed this one. Thought it was going to be 0-0 for most after the first half. I thought they were just going to equal each other out in the sense of Genk just not finding the back of the net. 16 shots, just 3 on target for them. It's every time something like this happens, people are going to be saying, but only if Paul Onuachu was there. Like, that's going to be the thing that comes up. Like, it's just natural, isn't it? And like, there's a couple of chances Samatta had that you're like, Onuachu probably would have reacted quicker. Onuachu probably would have done this, done that, which is unfair on Samatta because he's just a different player, but he isn't as good as Onuachu. It's not the Samatta from a couple of years ago, unfortunately. I think my favourite kind of battle within a battle was Daniel Munoz and Gaston Avila just kicking the absolute crap out of each other all game. It was just like Avila threw himself to the floor when Cuesta barely touched him, or McKenzie touched him. This man's he just cracks me up every time I watch him because he's just so entertaining. And Munoz, these guys that play on the edge, that kind of South American kind of do anything to win sort of mentality, but like you're going to give 110% all game and like just play on the edge. Like these two are like that, and they just were prone to like, just being in the same place at the same time, kicking each other. Paint still dislocated his shoulder or arm early on, and they just kind of like kept popping it back in all game, which is just bizarre. It was like after the second or third time, just take him off, bring on Urasaw, like you've brought in someone like that, or bring on Iron or Itel Hadj, like someone else just to just not risk that becoming a worse injury than it could have done. I don't know, I haven't seen anything if it has like been confirmed as a bad injury, but it just looked really uncomfortable. And for a player that is fast and sprints and does that sort of stuff, and he is pretty physical given his like small size and like pushing players around, like he needs to be able to use that arm, and he just did not look comfortable with it at all. It was 0-0 at half time. I think Genk really should have been ahead. They definitely had some decent chances. They just couldn't really convert. It then was just a mistake at the back, just not dealing with a long ball over the top. Fell to Galano Kirk. Really nice finish from him, actually, to make it 1-0 to Antwerp. They had so many chances after that on the counter-attack. They just would not convert, just couldn't do it. But then Genk really could not kind of get themselves back into the game with an equaliser. So as we already said, Antwerp were the winners of the weekend. They move on to 50 points, 8 clear of Club Brugge in 4th place. So any kind of notion of them dropping out, they've really turned the corner in terms of post World Cup. I think they've been a much better side. They closed the gap on Genk to 12 points, but obviously when things get halved and stuff like that, that's going to drop even further. So really, really good result for Antwerp, built off the back of their solid defence, I guess.
Yeah, which has been solid all season, actually, and it's been the kind of foundation of much of their work. There's always been question marks, obviously, about the offensive side of their game and whether there's quite enough for them to kind of pick up the big prize, but they're hanging in there at the moment and are very much contenders, and as results this weekend show that, you know, things are starting to concertina at the top, much like they are at the bottom. And there was a feeling when Onuachu left, just to go back to him for a second, that over the course of time was what was likely to happen. We're starting to see some signs of it already. I know Arioris was hugely frustrated with this game because, and I can see why, because Antwerp only really had one big chance in this game, which came from that long ball, and the gift for Kirk to score, which he did. Nobody was really going to miss that. Antwerp were pretty decent on the counter attack. I thought they had a few opportunities, half chances that were better chances than they were probably given credit for. Lots of needle in this game, as you would expect as well. I felt it was heading for a draw as well, funnily enough. I thought the first half wasn't particularly great. There was lots of physicality in it, but no real clear-cut chances being created by either side, and it was decided ultimately by, you know, a long ball and a mistake. Lots of people flying in with some wild challenges, and I'm surprised actually that we didn't see maybe a couple of red cards in this game. I thought the referee was quite restrained throughout most of this, which is interesting because they're not normally as restrained as they were here in Belgium. Antwerp will be delighted with this because this is their first win away to Genk in the league for 30 years. Obviously, they won there very recently, convincingly in the Cup, but this is their first win away in the league there, which obviously is even more significant in terms of the bigger picture at the moment. Yeah, interesting game, and the other results just kind of highlight how interesting things are getting now, because it looked, even after coming back from the World Cup break, as if Genk were going to maintain their form, and I think they've ultimately been pretty good still, even without Onuachu. There's more than enough offensive firepower there. On the subject of the firepower specifically, I would really like to see Arokadari getting a run ahead of Samatta. I just think Samatta's, to me, doesn't look completely fit or completely mobile enough to kind of contribute enough at the moment, and Arokadari has shown enough both on the ground and in the air, I think, to be given a run, because he'll definitely get the service from Pansel and Trezor, and I think he just offers more of an all-round game than Samatta does, and he looks like he has more confidence about him as well. He's a handful, and I'm not saying he's the answer, but I think there's potentially more goals in him over a period of time than there is Samatta, unfortunately. But I understand why they're sticking with him, because he's tried and tested and he knows the club, and there may be off the pitch reasons as to why Rockadari's not getting any starts yet. But again, we saw flashes in this game of the stuff he's got to offer. He did nearly get a couple of goals here.
Yeah, I can imagine he's probably, if not next game, probably the game after. Unless Samata scores, I think he'll probably be in. It just makes sense, wouldn't it? Given his record in French football so far this season, kind of like you said, the confidence he's bringing to the club with himself coming in. Let's quickly go over to Brussels then, shall we? For Anderlecht against St. Truden. A bit like the Charleroi game, this just really wasn't a contest at all. Anderlecht finished with 74% possession. Gianni Bruno was on the bench. We went for the Hara Hayashi partnership, which I didn't really like it last season that much. It didn't really do much this season. But everything kind of happened in the second half. Some pretty shocking defending from St. Truden, just bobbled the ball around after a long ball over the top. Benito Rahman, fresh from his pints in East End, put that one away. Nice, comfortable finish from him. He gets hooked 5 minutes later for Islam Slimani, who then gets his first goal for the club. Lovely ball in from Amuzu. Great header from Islam Slimani. It's 2-0. He almost gets an assist as well. A lovely little kind of backheel flick through to, I can't remember who it was actually that he found the ball with. It might have been Arnstad who fires it. I think Schmidt makes a save and then André is kind of there to tap it in. That gives him 2 goals in the space of 2 games. 3-0 at that point. St. John do bring on Gianni Bruno though, and he gets an absolutely ridiculous goal. Really nice volley from the edge of the box. If Gift Orban hadn't scored that second one, this probably would have been talked about a lot more because it's a really nice finish from Gianni Bruno. Gives him 11 goals, I think, for the season, but not really a contest in this one, which Anderlecht fans were very happy about. But for St. Truden, it's a strange one because they usually are quite competitive, even in games like this where they're considered the weaker side.
Yeah, I mean, it was a below par performance from their point of view. You know, they've been pretty consistently decent, I suppose, is probably the right word to use. And they've been one of the best sides since coming back from the World Cup break, actually, in terms of consistency. They have been good. And Bruno's obviously been in good form. Getting a goal, even though he didn't start the game, kind of underlines that he should have started the game. And that's probably what he said afterwards as well. From an Anderlecht perspective, that's 3 wins in their last 4 now, 10 points out of the last 12. And it's funny how things can kind of turn quite quickly. It only felt like, about 3 weeks ago, Brian Reimer was talking about needing 12 or 15 games maybe for things to start to kind of click in a way that he would want. And I think we're now starting to see some signs of that. There are still some rotational changes that he's playing with, like lineup wise and tactically. But I think we're starting to see an uplift, and he'll be hugely encouraged by that. I think Anders Dreyer getting the score sheet again. He's got 2 goals and an assist in his first 5 games. So he has definitely had a positive impact, and you can see exactly why he was brought in to score and to create. And he's definitely been doing that. Those first 5 games, the signs are kind of hugely encouraging from what we've seen, and it feels like we're kind of mentioning him almost every week when we talk about the Moves now. Such as his impact been really good in the second half. Anderlecht, particularly bit of a battering. I mean, it should have been more than 3, I think. I mean, it's 3, probably going on 5 or 6. And I know that afterwards, Brian Reimer was really delighted with that. You know, he said that he felt they'd worked really hard and prepared on a certain game plan, specifically with St. Truden in mind, and it all kind of came together for them in the second half, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means they're now just 1 point off of playoff 2.
Yeah.
1 point behind St. Truden, unbeaten in 4, 3 wins in those last 4. So since losing to sort of Aragon, they've really turned the corner. And they've now got that chance at playoff 2, which they didn't they were going to have. And the way they're playing, you'd expect them to probably break their way into there. If sides do drop off, it kind of puts pressure on Cercle, Veselo, even Standard now after this weekend to make sure they get back to winning ways. Even Ghent, actually, that's 3 without a win for them. So that while they've been looking up, they should also be kind of keeping one eye behind them, well, one eye over there, looking over their shoulder just in case. Because, yeah, Anderlecht are definitely starting to come, and Charleroi are also coming with that win. We could have a situation we had last season where like we had that final day St Truden trying to get in
Mm.
there, not making it. But I think it could be quite a competitive fight for playoff two. Let's talk about Standard. They hosted Kortrijk, and it's just going into this game. I was just thinking this is the sort of game where Standard will not play well because they play well against the big teams, but then against the teams that are worse than them, they just really struggle. And yeah, unsurprisingly, they lost. They had 9 shots, only one on target. The start of this game, it just wasn't a great game, to be honest. It wasn't a great watch. Not much really happened. There was a couple of counter-attacking plays from Kortrijk. Meswadi had his blocked by Bacardi. There wasn't really much happening at all. Second half was when it started to really work for both for Kortrijk, really. Game plan just kind of worked to perfection, I guess you could say. Martin Wazinski getting his first goal for the side since joining on loan from Charleroi. He puts it home in the 67th minute to give them a 1-0 lead, which at the time was very important because at the same time Zortava again were leading in the other game. So their margin from the bottom had been kind of was being cut. They took the lead, and yeah, Standard just really disjointed, I guess you could say. They kind of didn't really create much going forward, and I'm just looking at Chanak on the bench, and I'm just like, why is he not playing every game for this team? Like, what I don't get what they've got to lose with just giving him game time and getting him developed, because you've got rid of so many different players over the course of the kind of the season and stuff like that. Which is what I'd completely missed Alexander Bukska turning up at Standard Liège. That just completely caught me by surprise seeing him on the bench. Like, couldn't get a look in at Leuven despite them having no strikers. And now he's just at Standard. Bizarre. Emond was back though. It was nice to see him back. Didn't really make much of an impact coming off the bench because, well, this was I had no idea what happened here. In the 80th minute, Kortrijk basically in. Soleimani's in, but you can't really get his shot off. He does get his shot off. Well saved by Bodar. Then, I can't remember who it was, has their shot cleared off the line. Might have been Massimo Bruno, actually. His shot cleared off the line by Bacardi, but it's like way off the line. And then it's like, we've got a VAR check. And I presumed it was for the goal line thing, which was weird because it was nowhere near going in. But then you see that Lifeis just yanks Soleimani down, gets himself sent off, which caused me, I messaged you guys and was like, this is it coming. He gets himself sent off in the same week where he was talking about his desire to play for a top European league. And I was like, I think you then said he's not even a top defender in the Belgian league. Like, what was he thinking? Never been convinced by Lifeis and Ducen, to be honest. So it just was quite ironic that in that time he said that. Soleimani then picks himself up, dusts himself down, puts the penalty away. Kortrijk get the win in this one, 2-0. Fantastic result for them. Really, really important. Fans stayed well after the final whistle to celebrate. Standard were poor, really, really bad. A completely non-performance, but fair play to Kortrijk, they took advantage of it.
Yeah, they were poor indeed, Ben. You're right. It's interesting when you look at their kind of performance this week from a Standard perspective, because last week against Circle, they were decent actually, and I saw some of Ronnie Dyla's pre-match team chat before the Circle game last week, and there's a particular point in that team chat where he said, "I can see it in your eyes, boys, when you really want it, when you want to win, and I can see a different look in your eyes when you're not so bothered about winning." And I take it was the latter he saw in their eyes here, because they just they didn't want it enough. And fair play to Bernstort, they've gone there and taken sort of full advantage of that. And Kortrijk have had a great weekend, really. When you look at the other results, particularly last week when we highlighted the fact that it looked like things were starting to hit the buffers just a little bit for them. This is kind of quite a big result for them. Yeah, Standard just really poor, and I don't think they enjoy particularly playing at Slessing these days as well. They've dropped more points than they would have wanted or should have at home as well, and that's never a good sign when you're trying to kind of build consistency of any kind at all. So a frustrating one for Ronnie Dyla, particularly after a good performance last week, and that's the first Standard performance I think for maybe a month or so which actually has been below par. They have been showing a lot of signs of being better, and this is just a reminder of the kind of levels that they've been working so hard to try and avoid, I think.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's just frustrating because results kind of seem to go a little bit of their way. Like, if they'd managed to win this one, they'd have been leapfrogging Ghent and just a point behind Club Brugge for that going into fourth, which which is remarkable when you can look at the squad. Noah Hire up front's quite raw. They just don't have a striker. Like, I think Perica's in the very one of the worst in terms of finishing chances as well. So it's like he's one of their top scorers and he can't finish. Like, he's doing it without a striker. So, but it was just a really bad performance. Like, it was just one of those ones. If you were one of the other teams in the relegation zone, you'd be pretty frustrated with what you saw from Standard, because you'd have wanted them to go at a Kortrijk side that were starting to struggle a bit. So for them, it's like the perfect time to get that win, which obviously then puts pressure on Zulte Waregem and Oostend, who just both teams had to win this game in the sense of giving themselves a chance, not meaning the gap's too big. And it was Zulte Waregem who got the early lead in this one through Scott. The words you always use to describe bad defending is honking defending, and this was the definition of honking defending. It was so bad. Gano's making the run in behind. You can see him making the run in behind. Everyone can see him making the run in behind. The ball's going over the top, and Tong just kind of, he steps out so late to try and play offside. Like, it was so bad, like how late his reaction was to step out. And Gano's just in, comfortably puts it in. VAR check was quite short because it was just so clearly onside. And it was just like awful. Interestingly, Oostend did make a change in goal. William Hubert was back over Dion Phillips. Nothing he could really do about that one. Vossen then looked like he'd made it 2-0, but he was marginally offside. Unfortunately, Ruud Vormer had to then go off. He fell quite awkwardly, went and sat on the bench, as me and Scott were talking about before this. He just was sat on the bench for ages, and it was like, what's going on there? Then he just wandered back onto the pitch, but clearly something was wrong. It's now transpired that he's broken his collarbone and could be out for 6 weeks minimum after the surgery. So Ley is now having to plan without him, which is a massive blow for them. But, I mean, in this game, they really should have been further ahead by half-time. They had lots of chances. They were creating quite well, defending quite well as well, actually. Bossert made a couple of routine saves. The kind of back line of Fila, Dirks and Diesmas was doing all right. Obviously, without Vormer in there was a little bit of a struggle, but they were able to bring on Nicholas Roman, so that was fine. However, 75 minutes, they concede a hammer blow, basically. Fraser Hornby, who else? Lovely finish out of nothing, really, to make it 1 goal apiece. But at that point, you're thinking Oostend now they have to win. They need to push on for the win. But it was also Zulte Waregem after that. They were the side in the ascendancy. They were the side really pushing to try and get the winning goal, which they couldn't get. Finishes 1-1, boos from the home fans who knew how important it was. Gano should have scored a couple more at the end there. But in the grand scheme of things, it now means Kortrijk's lead is 4 points. So that's a huge, huge win for them. They're 4 points ahead of Zulte Waregem, which means they are also, 7 points above Oostend, and 6 points above Oostend, 4 points above Zulte Waregem. So I'm getting all my numbers mixed up here. Not sure how that's all working, but 6 and 4, and then 7 to Solang. We'll get there in the end. Kortrijk now obviously level on points with Eupen as well, and then Mechelen on 26. So it still is that 13 to 18 spot, but this just feels like such a massive blow to Oostend not winning this game. Whereas for Zulte Waregem, at least they play Kortrijk quite soon as well, so they have a chance to kind of catch up there. But losing Vormer, losing the lead, like, it felt to me like this could potentially be a bad turning point in their season.
Yeah, well, I saw all of this game, actually. It was one of the games I'd earmarked this weekend to watch for a number of reasons, partly obviously because of where they both are on the table and the significance of both needing the points. From an Oostend perspective, they didn't show enough to win it, I don't think. So in that sense, they're probably delighted to get a point. Zulte really should have got this over the line, I think, and were kind of unlucky not to. But as long as the game stays at 1-0, you know what I mean, you're definitely still in it, no matter how blunt you are offensively. And, you know, as you were saying, Fraser Hornby, who's been the main man for Oostend for a while now, they certainly missed him and he hasn't been in the side, getting another goal, and it meant quite a lot to him, actually. He was right over with the fans after scoring that, loving it, showing some passion, which is always good to see, because, you know, they bloody hell, they need that at the moment. They really do. I think there was a wild stat, something to do, I don't think Oostend have had a clean sheet in something like 18 or 19 now, which is just unbelievable. And I think in most most of those games they've conceded on average about 2 goals as well. So there's some basic data which is just the stuff of nightmares. Not a great performance. I think they really had to go into this game and not lose it, which ultimately is what they've done, but it doesn't really help them either. Zalta, on the other hand, are right in the middle of a period just now which will define their season, I think. I mean, this game was obviously massive because they were playing a side in the drop zone with them, but look at their next 2 games as well. Zalta next play Sarang away, and then they're at home to Kortrijk. Now, if they'd managed to win this weekend and then they go and win those next 2, this is me with my crystal ball, then their entire season almost completely changes. And I suppose it's still in their hands because those next 2 fixtures are just as significant as this one. So that's a 3-game stretch where their season can completely pivot on that. How the Ruud Vormer injury will influence this, we don't quite know yet, but probably not positively because he's had a much greater impact on the side since he came in than any of us would have imagined that he would, actually, which has been really quite interesting. Oostend's next 3 fixtures, Charleroi at home, Genk away and Club Brugge at home, all quite difficult at the moment. 2 of those 3 sides are in decent form, one of which is scoring a lot of goals. So, I don't see too many points for the Koos boys there. And we're now got, 9 games left in the regular season. Oostend are 6 adrift of safety at the moment. And if you thought there wasn't any margin before, I think we're well out of room for that now. They really need to kind of go on a run in those last 9 games. I mean, realistically, they probably need to go and win 4 or 5 of them, I think. And at the moment, I just don't see where that's going to come from.
No, it's getting more and more desperate because they haven't kept a clean sheet since September. I think it's something ridiculous, like 17 games. It's horrendous. And if they can't keep it out, then and when the Hornby's not there, they can't really score. It's just a recipe for disaster. I don't know what you can do. And I think what's coming out of the club off the pitch, it now makes so much sense why it's been such a car crash season. Like not paying hotels, not paying suppliers, hotels now not wanting to put the club up because they know they won't get paid. The club then released that statement, didn't they, where they were like, every side runs with a deficit, we're going to pay all these things and stuff. Like the fan, I think it was Oostend FR, like the one of the fan pages, they were like, well, we got 15 million in total for Theater, Hendry and Hulsager. Where's this money gone? There's that theory that it all went to Nancy in France to help keep them going, who then got relegated. Barnsley, they don't think money went there, but Barnsley got relegated as well. It's like the clubs that these guys have owned go down, and at the end of the day you have to be like, well, like this is how they run, this is how they operate, this is how their clubs exist. Like they've done it with 2 clubs, they're doing it with a 3rd. You could say that, come up with reasons that, oh yeah, no, like everything's fine, it's all being overblown, but like you clearly aren't running football clubs very well based on looking around and looking what's happening. Like the transfers in to replace those 3 players just haven't worked. Like defensively, they've gone from that great backline of Henry, Theater, and then have like Tonge or maybe Capon would play there. Obviously, still those 2 still there, but the other 2 were so good that defense seemed a lot better. We'd have to look at the stats to see if it was actually better, but it felt better. And there's a reason those 2 were then snapped up. Just haven't been replaced. Sakala never really been replaced. Maktar Gay, I guess Fraser Hornby has kind of replaced him. So you can say, well, that's kind of a win there. But Michael Biron scored again for Molenbeek. He was on the books, didn't play. Like, I feel like I'm sorry to people who are listening and like, oh, we just bang it on and on about East End. But as this stuff is coming out, I feel like we have to talk about a side where people have mentioned bankruptcy as a possibility, and they're struggling for funds when they've sold players, so they should have those funds. There's also rumours about youth coaches not being paid, which they said was completely wrong. So I guess believe what you will in terms of that, but the stuff that's happening on the pitch and then off the pitch, it seems to be connected, and it seems to be that it's a bit of a mess all round at the moment. And I feel like if a club's being run that badly, relegation it seems like a shoo-in, to be honest.
Yeah, it's the perfect storm. Sorry to use another coastal pun there, but it's the perfect storm for nothing good, unfortunately. And just, the more the weeks go by, the more stories kind of come out that kind of confirm what appeared to be the case for a long time, unfortunately. And it's not good, not good at all. And of course, we also got the the slightly ludicrous situation this week as well that former manager Yves van der Eyck and his staff are suing the club for unpaid severance wages that had been agreed when they left the club before Dominic Thalhammer came in. And Yves was actually on an Anderlecht fan podcast recently talking about this, and went as far as to say that he feels that the club has no honour and quite clearly has money issues. And I thought, okay, on his latter point, I don't think we can dispute that because of some of the recent behaviour and things we've seen. But for somebody who has had such a long-standing connection with that club, having been a manager twice and having a strong connection with the club, to come out and say that they have no honour, I think probably tells us that his own relationship with that club is albeit he's not employed by them anymore. I think his footballing sentiments for the Koos boys, I think, have probably evaporated on any sense now that he realises the scale of the problem perhaps behind the scenes there as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a stinky situation, I guess we could say. It's not going well, and it just smells of relegation. And we've seen teams go down with poor finances that then just don't exist anymore. So that you have to think that could be a possibility. Like, you just don't know what is going on there and what's really going to happen. I think we'll only really find out if they do go down, with kind of what has to happen will be a massive clear out of the squad, and all that sort of stuff will be a very different looking East side in the Challenger Pro League. Which leads me nicely on to talk about the Challenger Pro League. Scott, obviously, end of the regular season, most of the playoff positions were kind of confirmed, but there were a couple up for grabs, and they came down to a little bit of drama with the final games.
Yeah, it was pretty wild actually, the final round of games, up until the last few minutes of the games, which were all played at the same time, obviously because of what was at stake and the spirit of fairness and all of that. It was swings and roundabouts in those last 5 minutes. I was getting terribly excited watching to see if there was going to be a goal in a particular game that was going to change it again at the last moment. But last weekend's results: Beveren battered Dender comprehensively 5-2 at the Free Teal. Denza lost 3-2, a really dramatic late winner from Anderlecht under-23's Nielsen Angulo, which secured Anderlecht under-23's a playoff 1 spot and saw Denza missing out. Lommel lost to Lierse in Limburg, which means that Lierse have secured a playoff 1 spot in the end at the expense of Lommel, actually, who had a bit of a nightmare opening 20 minutes in that game, conceding twice and not managing to find a way back. So that'll be a big disappointment to them, particularly as last week I was saying they were giving out free beer and free chips and also 50% off tickets for that game as well. So that'll be a sore one for the Lommel fans. And SL16 played a goalless draw with Club Next. In terms of the bigger picture, Molenbeek have returned to the top. Virton are still bottom, but the playoffs are now set. So we know that playoff 1, the championship playoff, no points halving, everybody. Remember that as we go into this, will consist of Molenbeek, Beveren, Beerschot, Lierse, Anderlecht under-23s and Club Next. And playoff 2, which is the relegation playoff, will feature Lommel, Denza, Young Genk, Dender, SL16 and Virton. I think Lommel and Denza aren't in any real danger of going down. I think it's realistically between Young Genk, Dender, SL16 and Virton. I think there's more than enough daylight really for Lommel and Denza at the moment, but they will still consider that hugely disappointing, because I think both of them will feel that they should have been playoff 1 sides. But I suppose that underlines how competitive this division's been, and will be even more competitive next year, obviously, with 3 dropping down. An interesting bit of news over the last week as well: new T1 coming in at Virton, Jose Junchomp, remember him, everybody? Most recently at Serang, former Mouscron manager as well. He's come in at Virton, tasked with keeping them in the Challenger Pro League, and it looks like if he can do that, he probably will be staying on next season as well. So an important short-term goal for him. Top scorer is now Lucas Stazen. He's got 14 and 20. He's overtaken Tierno Barry at Beveren, who has 14 and 21 right behind him. So we're just waiting now to see what the playoff fixtures throw up. when they come out, because that might tell us a little bit as to how the playoffs are going to go. But I suspect, judging by the way the regular season's gone, then it's highly likely that the playoffs, particularly the championship playoff one, will probably go till the final week.
Yeah, just kind of looking from the outside looking in, you predict it's going to be a Beveren-Molenbeek race for that promotion spot, with Club Next, Anderlecht Futures kind of playing the spoiler role, Lees probably as well playing the spoiler role, and then Beerschot hoping to take advantage of any of those two slip-ups. But obviously Beerschot are going into it with pretty horrendous form, just like 1 win in 5, whereas the other two are going into it unbeaten. Well, also Club Next and Anderlecht Futures are on a good run of form as well. Lees obviously have won 2 in a row, so yeah, I think, again, one to look out for. All those games, and especially the ones between Molenbeek and Beveren, they could be the decisive ones, to be honest, or they're both going to draw those and it's going to be the other ones. But should be good, should be interesting, and I think looking forward to welcoming one of those teams into the Pro League at the end of the season. Before we do head off, though, let's speak about the national team. Domenico Tedesco was announced as the new head coach of the Red Devils. My personal opinion, a much better appointment than any of the other names that were being mentioned, such as Henri, Pirlo. I can't remember some of the other ones as well. Frankie Verkouten's obviously coming in as technical director as well, so they're going to work together. I think, Scott, you're going to do a little bit more of a rundown on Tedesco, but kind of from my opinion, I think it looks like in a world where international football isn't considered the pinnacle anymore, and you're not going to get the big names coming into international football, someone like a Tedesco looks like it's going to be a smart appointment, but we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting and interesting appointment as well, Ben. I'm hugely encouraged by the fact that the Belgian FA's task force has actually in the end decided to go with what seems like kind of quite a sensible package in pairing up the legendary Frankie Verkouten, aka the Little Prince, as the new FA technical director. I mean, a Belgian footballing legend. I think they were always going to go down a road like that with an appointment like this, to be honest. Lots of people, I think, romantically had notions of it being Michel Prudhomme. Wasn't to be. He wasn't interested in the post. Frankie Verkouten always was from the first moment there was a conversation, from what I can understand, and seemed really happy to be taking up post as the new technical director. He needs no introduction, of course. He's got 63 caps of his own for the Red Devils and 9 goals in a very successful international career. As a player, of course, he's an Anderlecht legend, almost 400 caps for Anderlecht, periods at Nantes and Molenbeek as well. And then as a coach, a lot of time in Belgium in his career, periods at Mechelen, Anderlecht, Genk, Cercle Bruges, Antwerp, and in Portugal with Sporting Lisbon, as well as a number of other clubs in the Middle East too. So he's very happy to be back. Domenico Tedesco, on the other hand, very exciting young Italian-German coach. Obviously had periods way back at the beginning of his coaching career. Actually starts out at the Stuttgart youth side as T1, and then had periods with the under-17s and 19s at Hoffenheim that don't get mentioned too often. He then goes on, completes his coaching badges and has periods as T1 at Schalke, Spartak Moscow, and Red Bull Leipzig, where he wins the German Cup, of course. So in terms of his coaching career as a T1, it's not necessarily glittering, but it is interesting. He does quite like to play 3-4-1-2. That seems to be his sort of preferred formation. But the very interesting thing about him, I think, as a coach, is that he's quite pragmatic and adaptable. If you look at his periods at Schalke and Spartak and Leipzig, he did vary that 3-4-1-2 quite a lot. And he spoke at the press conference when he was unveiled the other day about, well, the important thing is, although I have preferences, you have to be adaptable to the players at your disposal, and that has to determine the way that you play and the way that you can play as well. And I thought that was hugely encouraging because, as we all know, one of the long-standing criticisms of Roberto Martinez, who on the whole did a fantastic job, was that he had a plan A and that was it. And Domenico Tedesco, I think, is a modern, responsive, highly adaptable kind of coach who likes to play high-intensity attacking football. So I think in that sense, it's a really good appointment, and working with Frankie Verkouten, I think, will stand him in good stead. Frankie said something really interesting as well. Equally, he said, don't be surprised if you see me in the technical area and potentially in the dressing room as well. I think he wants to work quite closely with Domenico. So just for the press that are listening to the pod, don't worry if you see Frankie in areas you wouldn't normally see a technical director, because the plan is for them to work very, very closely together. Really interesting character, Tedesco. Some fun facts for you, everybody. He is the youngest ever Red Devils T1. He is only 37, which means he's younger even than me, everybody. Fancy that. He also has degrees in business engineering and a master's in innovation management, and did work for a short period in what some people would consider a real job. He worked for a car manufacturer briefly before beginning his football and coaching career. Worked somewhere on an assembly line, I think, in design. So that probably explains the business engineering and innovation management academic background. And a bit like our Joris, he's a big polyglot. He speaks a number of languages, German, Spanish, English, Italian, French and Russian, but not Dutch. So much like Roberto Martinez, he's freed up from one of the languages spoken in Belgium, one of the main languages, which I think from a political perspective and navigating the media will standing him in very good stead, much like it did with Roberto Martinez. So exciting times ahead, I think, and not too long before that first game, that first qualifier against Sweden in Stockholm, Ben.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that one. And I think with Tedesco, the interesting thing we're going to see is how he adapts to international management, in a sense of at Schalke, he had that really good first season, gets him second European football, and then it just all kind of unravels in the second season. And now they've obviously completely unraveled as a club, and it's like they're just not the same. Spartak was slightly different, because he came in when they were struggling and he just rejuvenated them before leaving in weird circumstances, if I remember rightly. It was quite like it didn't have to, he could have potentially stayed, but there were disagreements about things. So it wasn't like the side were doing badly when he left. Whereas then Leipzig comes in, wins the cup, but starts the next season badly, kind of like under Schalke, and then gets let go. So it's just interesting to see, like, right, well, what was the issue with that ability to be kind of keep the success more consistent? And whatever the factors were that meant that he couldn't do that, are they now not there when it comes to the international game, where he doesn't have to then worry about that? Like, there's nothing to worry about with transfers and like that sort of stuff. He can just be like, this is my tactical setup. This is how we're going to play. I'm just going to work on this. I've got the entire Belgian citizenship to pick players that can fit into my system. I guess a couple of things. Like to see him, obviously we're biased. We want to see him include a couple of the Pro League guys. Probably a Mike Tressor, I think, is what we're calling for. Be interesting to see if he goes for a Van Aken, if he goes for some of these guys that have been around, like an Alderweireld, a Vertonghen, or is he going to be like, I'm not going to touch these guys. I'm going Faiz, Tiata, De Bast, and that's going to be my back three, and they're who I'm going to stick with, or one of the other, like Eden Donker or someone like that. And then in midfield, where's he going to go? Like, is Witzel going to be there, or is he going to be like, actually, I'm going Tielemans, I'm going Lavia instead, one of those guys?
I think it's
just so many interesting
it's going to be very interesting, because as we know, there's a serious amount of talent just waiting for their opportunity now to be integrated into that side. And of course, he famously did a bit of a Bielsa, if I can call it that, at his interview, where he presented an analysis and breakdown of 40 young Belgian players that he wanted to work with and integrate into the setup, which I thought was really, really interesting and hugely encouraging, actually, that he chose to focus on those players. I mean, recently, Amadou Onana obviously has been looking really good, and the thought of him playing regularly in that midfield with, Romeo Lavia is tremendously exciting, at least on paper. So I think there are loads of reasons to be optimistic, and working with somebody like Frankie Verkouteren will help keep him, help keep his feet on the ground, and also help him learn more about Belgian football culture quickly as well. So exciting times, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll see what happens with those first qualifiers. I think they've got a friendly against Germany coming up as well, so some good tests. Sweden will be a difficult game, but you think they should be able to win. But it'll be interesting. Yeah, that first kind of squad, that's what you're looking at, isn't it? You just want to see, like, where's the direction? Are we staying old, or are we moving on now? We shall see. But I think that's probably all we have time for this evening. As always, Scott, it's been a pleasure.
It has indeed. See you soon, everyone.
And we definitely will. We'll definitely see you next week for another episode. But in the meantime, if you like what we do, please do leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. And you can also get in touch with us to talk about anything on mainly on Twitter. So if you just look for the Belgian Football Podcast on there, you'll find us all there. But as always, thank you very much for listening, and we'll speak to you very soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.